Greetings. You're listening to the Match, Marry, Mate show, where we aim to be the #1 relationship education podcast for Black women and couples in the country, as I teach you how to get your love lives together. Here I guide you on your dating and relationship journey, empower you to honor yourself and own your truth, teach you how to navigate and negotiate your needs and desires with men. I'm your host, your girl, Joyce Robinson Myers, and welcome to another episode, love bugs. I'm here with the second episode of season 4, titled Springing into Womanhood. I have 7 topics selected for you intended to teach you about various stages in womanhood and ways of approaching singleness, relationships, and marriage. We're also focusing on the 4th energy center of the body, which is our hearts, representing love for self and others, compassion and empathy, forgiveness and acceptance, transformation and change, grief and peace, and last, awareness and insight, all of which we'll cover in some way or another in this season. You're listening to episode number 23, Wife-Minded Singleness. Let's begin with the power of affirmation. We start every episode with an affirmation as a way to center self, listen to the body, and honor our spirit. Ask yourself, how are you today? What moods, feelings, or emotions come up? Use that energy to speak life, wholeness, and healing over yourself using the power of your own voice. Speak it into existence with an I or I love. I love learning about myself. I love learning more about male nature. I love giving myself my best opportunities. Today, we're chatting about your mentality, how you view yourself as a single woman, but also a degree of mindfulness you hold about being a wife at the same time. I'm sharing some real life examples to make it more practical for you. And towards the end, I share a story from my own life. My husband weighs in with his own experience, and I point to a more well-known example just to add more context. This show builds off of episode 22, where we discussed womanhood before wifehood, and is the perfect prequel to episode 24, which will drop next week. Last, if you want to book a one-on-one call with me and you're looking for a discounted option, I have one that may work for you. If you're willing for parts of your session to appear as an anonymous secret story on the Match, Marry, Mate podcast, you can book your call under Awareness plus Secret Story for an over $100 discount. See the link in the show notes for more details. Y'all know I'm earning my PhD, studying the science of love and social connection to place myself in the best position to support my community. Studies show, and I believe, that with proper relationship education, we can produce smarter, safer, and happier romantic decisions that improve the quality of our relationships as we match, marry, and mate. Because why, y'all? Black love matters, and we're in much need of some Black family restoration. Enjoy the show. When I'm first introduced to women who may be interested in working with me or who are newly onboarded, they often echo this refrain of free agent, or he's not my man. Of course, I do not take issue with single women enjoying their singlehood, but I also don't want for them to ignorantly work against self. If you're a single woman and you're not looking to date, to one day secure a long-term relationship or marriage for yourself, then this is not going to apply to you. But if you are, this episode is specifically for you. Also, if you're too young to be dating for marriage, this also wouldn't apply to you. Please enjoy your teens and 20s. Have a grand old time. Some women tend to believe they can behave however they want to as a single woman, and it will have no bearing on their prospectus of marriage. But this just isn't true. Now, I think it goes without saying that I'm not talking about the pick me kind of women or even the women who'd engineer themselves for the male gaze. What I'm referring to is a level of mindfulness and maturity that speaks to the fact that men are assessing their desired traits and who they want to marry from hello, just like we are. And there are certain traits or situations that they could witness or be made aware of that could turn them off. Men are less accommodating relationally and less resilient emotionally. So, in most cases, should you demonstrate traits or show yourself unfavorably, as the guy in question would deem so, he may not end the connection altogether, like how women generally would. Instead, he'll keep you around to have whatever access to you he can manage, but any level of seriousness is likely gone out the window. Now, again, in many cases, men are the pursuers. So by nature, they make the decision to get serious about their pursuit, especially one that leads to marriage, in advance. Think about this in the context of when you pursue opportunities too. You usually commit to a process before you commit to undergoing it. Now, I know for me with grad school, I made the decision to get my doctorate well before I ever started applying to grad schools. Switching back to relationships, you want to determine, not by pressuring a man or casting him to the novel that you've already written out, or even by over interrogating him, but through getting to know him over time. If you believe he's made a decision for himself to be married, this is so important. First, he makes a decision for himself, and his interactions with you, including a commitment, are an extension of it. So lots of women are trying to or hoping for a man to commit to them when they have not even made a committed decision for themselves or for himself yet. Now, assuming he's decided for himself that he's ready to be married, ready to be a husband, he's also decided the type of woman he is looking for. Now, you may or may not be that, but that's not the point here. What I want you to gain is, should you meet the criteria, you don't want some fleeting or absent-minded or seemingly innocent moment or trip or event or return of an ex. You don't want those things to cost you your connection with him. Now, let's walk through some examples that I've had to support newbie clients through. This couple was in love and really bonded, and then her ex popped up. I cannot say for certain that the guy would have proposed to her, but it was trending in the right direction until this moment. She over communicated with him about some interaction and intentions between her and the ex, and it started to sour the connection. Now, I'm not talking about an ex who popped up and the guy you're talking with is insecure and controlling and being ridiculous. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about not having a certain wisdom to keep certain distances so that the closeness of it doesn't spill over into connections that you have established outside of any individual man, but in this case, an ex. Without going into too much detail, I want to add that she was the one who had error based on how their relationship was set up. So this was not on his part. And his part, I mean the guy she was dating, not the ex. But she didn't realize it. A small part of it was a degree of ignorance, but most of it was that she had the "so I'm single" mindset. Now, don't get me wrong, she was single, as in unmarried. But one question that I have with women who usually taunt this phrase is, yes, but do you want to stay single? And then it begins to sink in. So you want to carry yourself for where you are, but also where you want to go too. And you don't want where you are now to cost you other places for you to go because you have an over identification with your quote unquote single status. So, yes, as a single woman, identify as just that. But do not become so identified with it that you spoil yourself from being anything more either. Example number two, another couple who was in love, and I happen to know both of them to a similar degree. So I can say that they were both in love with each other and that he was just about ready to commit to her. But there was still one more thing he was waiting to see. And that was how she responded in an intense moment of heat and disagreement. Then the blow up came. And in it, she used language that any man would consider disrespectful or emasculating. She thought it didn't matter because, in her mind, I would never speak that way to my husband. And he wasn't that. Now, true, but again, a man has decided if he wants you to be his wife well before you take the office. You cannot behave in any old kind of way and clean it up with the fact that the man isn't your husband. I knew the moment I was told the events that any thoughts that he had about proposing to her were off the table now. All right, example number three. This couple, they were just dating, so not exclusive. And she was dating more than one guy, and he knew about it. Now, he was dating other women too. So the multi-dating isn't the point. They happened to cross paths at the same event one evening. They both acknowledged each other and went about their way. But he was starting to see a future with her specifically. And so what did she do? She used this as the opportunity to let him know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you ain't my man. So again, I'm sparing details for privacy's sake, but you can imagine how any woman would send this message. Now she's free to behave however she wants to, but you also cannot control what it will cost you either. So in our next episode, I'm actually going to share a story that's similar to this one. And I'm going to share that one in much more detail because I have permission to use it as a teachable moment. But for this story, the guy couldn't believe she behaved in that way. Just like the earlier two examples and the theme of this episode, it's not about you doing whatever you want to do in your singleness. It's about being so single-minded, especially with the men who are dating and courting you, that you shoot yourself in the foot. It's not necessary to reinforce to a man that he's not your man or that you're single. It's just not necessary. I mean, unless he's trying to act like he's something that he's not, and you got to be like, whoa, Nelly. Or he's trying to act like, he's more to you than what it is, wanting husband privileges and perks, and he's just a boyfriend, something like that. But if that is not what's happening, why over-identify with singleness, especially when you know you want a long-term relationship or marriage, right? Like the math isn't mathing there. And that's the point of this episode. Love bugs, let's take a quick break. And then I'll be back to close the show with 3 stories that show how this concept lands in real time. And if you're enjoying the show and you would like to keep this podcast in production, consider making a donation. Thank you and see you soon. In the last episode, I asked, what kind of woman do you want to be? Today, I am asking you, what kind of wife do you want to be? You're still you in both of those equations, but that wife persona will be an extension of your womanhood identity. You see why it's best to develop her first? Now, however you answer that question, and it's okay if it's still forming, commit to being that kind of woman too, especially in your dating and how you interact with men. Of course, certain things will be reserved for the man who will become your husband. But your natural way of being, including being womanly, should not shift or be sacrificed man to man. Neither should you act out of character just because you're single or let one situation cost you an entire connection or relationship you've been investing into. I want to share a personal example from my own courtship, while I also give you a reminder about my personal story that my husband has previously shared on this podcast. Now, on my end, I just so happened to have met his mother and some other relatives before I had ever met him. In this context, I had more of a neighborly position, right? That's how I knew his kinfolk. I'm just going to be neighborly. No one then was thinking about me as a potential mate for their son or family member. Still, those relationships existed before and outside of Jeremiah and I. Much later, he tells me that he asked around about me, my character, my decision making, and just a general report of what others thought about me from their interactions with me. Now, I had no clue that those worlds would collide in that way. But when they did, you best believe Jeremiah gave his due diligence before he became more serious with me. And at that point, he was thinking about going the distance with me. And that's why learning more in that way was important for him. Now, to be candid, I was not thinking about myself as a potential wife in that season of my life or in my relationship with the family members I had established it with. But I had decided on the kind of woman I wanted to be. And that's exactly who I was to anyone I knew or had met. And when people asked around about it, especially when they were asked what they thought about me as a wife or even his wife, it worked for me. Even then, there was a wifeliness about me that people could note, even when I wasn't one, at least to Jeremiah. At some point, my clients and even other women will bring up cooking. Now, they're dating a guy, things are going well, and they are trying to decide if they should cook for this man. Cooking is one of those skills that lots of women like to say they will only do for their husbands. And I get this sentiment here because I will not be cooking for a man who isn't my husband either. But I will say, how much does cooking matter to him? Now, I'm not talking about someone having you in the kitchen all day, every day in this labor intensive kitchen experience. But how much does being fed by his wife matter to him? Maybe not daily or even weekly again, but just that he wants a home cooked meal from his wife from time to time or at his request. If it matters, I recommend that at some point you set a standard there, of course. You cook a meal, you decide the degree of labor or time you're willing to invest based on where the relationship is, all of that, to let him know your willingness and gain a sample of your skill. All right. So there's a standard. Whatever your standard is, listen, I'm not going to do this. I know for me, I have like 3 meals that my mom taught me how to do that I can put my foot in. And I'm not blessing no man who's not my husband with the legacy of those meals, like that has been passed down. Not happening. I also have this other meal. I spent time learning how to make this meal. It's a French meal by Julia Child. And I don't particularly enjoy French food, but I really wanted to learn how to make this meal. And I labored to learn how to make it. And it's like a 12, 13-hour kitchen experience to be able to pull it off. What is it? Beef bourguignon. I'm not really good at French, but that's my best attempt at how to say it. And I'm just not making that for a man who's not my husband. It's too much work. So I get it. Have your standards. But if it really matters to him, again, decide the degree of labor, time, and all of that you're willing to invest for him to gain a sample of your skill. Don't go all out, but do show that you have some of what he's looking for. Now, I don't recommend this in every single situation, but it is a popular recommendation of mine that can be worked out to the extent that everybody's happy. And isn't that what we're going for in relationships? So a few weeks back, my husband shared his own story about how an ex-partner handled a certain situation, and it cost them a level of intimacy and emotional trust in the relationship. In this case, she was not so caught up on her single status that she missed the forest for the trees, like how I mentioned earlier. But there was a level of ignorance or some blinders she had on how a girlfriend in a relationship headed toward marriage would start to shift in her behavior, especially her emotional behavior to her man. So here's a small clip from Jeremiah.
I definitely have an experience where, I was thinking long and hard about sharing something that I thought was hard for me to share. I know it came with a certain amount of guilt on my part. I was not sure if it said something bad about me because of what I was feeling. It was something I needed to share with a former partner. And I was hesitant because I felt like I was working through some things in therapy, trying to find the right words. And is this coming from an unhealthy place? Mm-hmm. Let me do the work before I talk about it. I hadn't gone through all of that work. And I just had a countenance when I was with this person at that time. And they picked up on it. Like, you seem not yourself, la, da, 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 da. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it. Still some things I'm trying to sort through, find the right language.
Right.
And they were like, well, let's work through it together. You can trust me with this. Blah, blah, blah. And against my intuition, I decided to open up at that point. And it didn't go well. It wasn't even something I was planning to do in the moment. But the trust in them that I had at that time, there was an encouragement to open up.
I see.
And then thereafter, every time an argument came up, it was used as a weapon against me. It was like, well, since you think this XYZ of me, then why should blah, blah. It was used not only in the moment that I feel like the vulnerability was betrayed, but then on an ongoing basis, it was weaponized against me to make me look bad in an argument. And so, needless to say, I never spoke on anything of significance that I thought was super important. Not in a real way.
Yeah.
I just kind of kept it to myself, spoke to other people about it. And I also never had the same level of trust for that person.
Ladies, I'm not telling you to treat a man who is not your husband as if he is your husband. What I am saying is that you have to possess a degree of wifeliness to the extent that it translates on the men you're dating and give him something more to envision with you. Outside of cooking, vacations or girls' trips have become another hot topic in this area. Again, be a single woman. But if you know you're dating men and you have marriage in your heart for the near future, be mindful of how you carry yourself. Also, like the wife you want to be. Another way of putting this is you're interviewed for the job before you received an offer or a proposal. And even still, there's a probationary period before the full trust but verify process is complete. This is not a process you want to fake or even can afford to fake. Another reason why deciding what kind of woman you want to be before you think about what kind of wife you want to be is valuable. I want to close this episode by pointing to a male cast member on Ready to Love, Dallas Fort Worth. I'm purposefully switching genders so you can see the view from the other side, but also because I said earlier that you have to determine if the guy in question has made a decision for himself for a serious relationship or marriage first. And this will help you be able to do that more. Now, I won't mention his name, but if you watched, you'll know who I'm referring to. For a few weeks, he had a reputation of being a party boy. Whether he was one or not, that's the energy that he emitted to the group. At one point, he even said that he goes out from a particular day of the week all the way to another day of the week. And it only left like 2 days. It was 2 days of not partying. And that was his norm. When questioned about how he could make space for dating or a relationship with that schedule, his response was that he was outside until he found a woman that gave him a reason to let go of those party-like ways. Now, when I heard him say that, I knew he was not quite ready to be a husband. And it didn't matter that he had some time before he walked into that office or not. What mattered is that he was saying he was in the market for marriage, but his lifestyle did not seem to match that reality. If you were in the market for marriage, then you start learning what husbands do and who they are, even before you become one. And the same is also said for women. If you were in the market for marriage, then you start learning what wives do and who they are, even before you become one. Also, if I'm dating a woman and I'm looking for evidence of the man's decision to marry, again, that decision is made first before he decides on who the actual woman will be. For this cast member, that evidence of that decision is consistently lacking. Many of the female cast members began to say a party boy and a husband aren't two identities that can exist for the same man at the same time, so it turned them off. Now, likewise, how some of the stories I shared today turned the men off from the women they were dating. Now, woman to woman, let me give you a little game here. When it comes to a man assessing the women he's dating for marriage, you want to be a man's vision, not his reason. Let's use that same ready to love male cast member. He was in the streets looking for a woman to be the reason he settled down. You don't want to be that woman. Usually, a man looking for a reason has not made a decision for marriage unto himself. And this is slippery because if he marries you, it'll feel like you are filling a slot, as if any woman could have been his wife. Now, I have a client, Shanice, who spoke about this with a previous marriage in episode 12, I Feel Like a New Woman. She literally said, I just felt like I was filling a slot. I want to protect you from that. I want to give you a cautionary tale on how to look for those things up front. So either you'll feel like I'm just a woman filling a slot, or you'll spend your time trying to convince him or waiting it out, hoping he'll see that you are reason enough. And that's just not a good look either. But a man who has already committed to marriage for himself can date with the vision in mind of what he sees in his future wife. And once he meets her, once he meets you or comes to know you, he'll recognize you as her. That's it, and that's all. We end every episode with thought or heart-provoking questions for your journal. Journaling is simply prayers on paper, and the Most High tends to those too. Dear listener, what does wife-minded singleness mean for you? Do you have any examples from your own life similar to the ones I shared in this show? How can you manage your dating journey in a way where it does not cost you eligible men? As you reflect, what lessons have you learned about this concept in your own dating and relationship history? It's okay to write about the blessings and the burdens. Pour it into your journal today. Release yourself, free yourself, and most of all, be yourself. P.S. No woman is better at being you than you. If you're interested in my research projects, my coaching work, or want me to speak about either at your next event, please reach me at hello@matchmarymate.com. I hope you feel empowered and inspired after today's show. If you also want to share some topics that you'd like to hear, please use the comments feature on this episode or shoot me an email at podcast@matchmarrymate.com. Today, I'll leave you with this quote from Amy Bloom. Marriage is not a ritual or an end. It is a long, intricate, intimate dance together, and nothing matters more than your own sense of balance and your choice of partner. Thank you for joining me today and tuning into another episode of the Match Marry Mate Show. Until our next time together, love, light, and relationship. Remember, we grow as we go, and I'll be with you in the next episode. Cheers.